do you guys want to just start talking about the inspiration of the Bloodline and how far back you guys started the project?
Why don't you talk about it?
The inspiration, really, just like the first one came from Brandon, whereas the first one was a little bit more items or details in his life, we really want to make this one more about kind of the personal side of his life. And so the idea around the Bloodline, to back up a little bit, at the time we were in the process of working on the shoe, Brandon was expecting a son.
Okay.
And we were really kind of looking at that and kind of looking at sort of his life has been progressing, and so it's like, okay, so you've made it to this point, you've kind of traveled the world, you're in Milwaukee now, and you've got a child on the way, and so this really idea of this sort of line of descent kind of carried through, and this really the name came from, and then that was sort of like at a point for a while, like we kind of looked at where he had been, being in Milwaukee, and some of the things we could draw from inspiration there, like the College Harbor Museum that's there. A lot of that was sort of like a juxtaposition to like him in the city, being from California, a little more flashy, like this blue collar town. But as we really started to dive into the details about kind of like that path that got him there, we said, well, really, there's a much more rich story going here. And then we really kind of broke those items down and tried to build each of those into the graphics that are on the shoe.
Okay. We start out every project by just sitting down and saying, what's going on in your life? Like these guys every year. So he went through his first year in the league. He was, before he got into the league, he's eating top ramen. Now he's going out for steak dinners. And so they change, their tastes change. And Black Ice was, I think, representative of what he was like in his first year. Mm-hmm. And when we sat down, we said, okay, shoe number 2, what's going on? As John said, he was going to have a kid. That was a completely new change in his life. And I think in addition to that, this idea that there were all these kids out there who were fans of Brandon, who are also sort of part of his bloodline. Like, he's now, the line of descent is all these new point guards now who are following him. So there was this thing going on with, he's got, his line of descent, but then there's all these kids that are following him. So this whole idea of Bloodline, plus it's just a cool name. And you can have a name that makes sense to the theme, but if the name is kind of whack, then it's like let's not go with that, and maybe we have to change the whole theme. But the theme, the name, everything sort of worked. And then, this idea that he'd been in Milwaukee, he was a little bit more grounded there. Those were the initial sort of ideas and inspirations behind the shoe. Our idea, I think, was to take this whole strap thing that we played around with in the first one. We're always trying to figure out how to take it to a different performance level. And I think if there was one criticism from the first shoe, it was that the strap was really more cosmetic than it was functional. So we didn't want to do a repeat of that. We wanted to make it a functional strap. We knew that, Brandon had an injury in his first year, 5th metatarsal, or it was a Jones fracture was what it was called. So we wanted to support his foot in the midfoot area. So we thought, let's move the strap up into the midfoot area, keeping in mind that this line or this bloodline on the shoe always had to kind of drop below the jean line. Mm-hmm. So that it was the one thing that you saw as it dropped below, when you look at your toe down, you're always seeing that line. Yep. So, we started with 2 straps, which was this shoe. We started as more of a mid-cut. He's really superstitious, so he liked the fact that it was lighter weight. He had a great series, so he was kind of on this whole low thing, as is everybody is kind of on the whole low thing. So we wanted it to be lower. We didn't want it to be a low. So okay. I would say that this falls more into that 5/8 type range where you still feel like you're getting some support, but it's not so low where you're like, man, I just can't play in this.
Okay. And what was his feedback when you guys kind of showed him the Bloodline theme and storyboard?
As I remember, when we were up in Milwaukee presenting it to him, Ryan ran him through the boards and kind of like, okay, setting out the story, basically what we just talked about there. I recall his response was he was pretty excited about it. I mean, at that point in time, I think we were at an early enough stage where we could go with a double strap option, or we could take it in lower cut. But kind of some of those points of influence that Ryan just mentioned with regard to having played alone in the playoffs, feeling quicker, we definitely tracked in that direction. But I mean, as I recall, he was pretty excited about the idea and the story. He liked that we were incorporating those personal elements from kind of like where he had been, where he was going into the shoe, and really felt strongly about the low top direction.
And coming off the black ice, what were some of the things that he was looking for? Obviously he got hurt in it too, but things that he thought you guys could improve on or get after.
He was really, actually, and Ryan mentioned the Jones fracture. That was actually a point that he was really kind of, something that both he and like the trainers were concerned about to make sure we were reinforcing the shoe in that area or in those areas. So like if you kind of look at kind of where it sets up, we really raised up the sidewall of the midsole, so he's got a nice buttress there. It's supportive, but also soften up it as he kind of cuts and changes direction. He doesn't. It kind of acts as like that kind of point of like break there. Then you look kind of where the strap comes down. It really kind of all falls in that area to really support that bone. That was really kind of the main point of focus for him.
But those are the needs of every point guard.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Like every point guard, when they're cutting, needs a ramp or a bank. Like that stopping point. And the thing with with Brandon is he talks about like milliseconds.
Yeah.
And when he's cutting in a game, just that little bit of time that he can cut and move to the next spot on the court is, a lot of times that's the difference between getting by a guy like a Chris Paul, or these lightning quick point guards in the league. It's all those little teeny things. And so, not only in terms of just being able to provide like a break for him when he's cutting laterally, but also supporting his foot so that there's not a lot of room in the shoe. That's the one thing I think with a lot of shoes that have gone away from straps is players' feet are so different. I mean, every single guy, if the three of us took our shoes and socks on, you'd see three really different feet. And so the one thing with the midfoot strap is it gives you the opportunity to really lock it down. And I think that's the one thing that he really talked about was in addition to dropping it down, was just give me something to lock it down. He was still on the strap thing.
Yeah.
We're moving away from that in future shoes, sort of evolving the whole look. But I think for this shoe, that was really the point of emphasis. And then from there, it was about how do we now incorporate stories into that strap. And so, a lot of people put straps on shoes, but sometimes it's just like an extra piece. And nobody really incorporates a theme or a story. And I think that was kind of the third part of the evolution of the story around the shoe was, when people buy shoes, I think they buy a theme around the color, whether it's the red or the grapes or whatever it is. In the footwear industry, it's a hell of a lot easier to say I'm going to go get some grapes than it is to go say I'm going to get the white, black, purples. And so for us, it was really about like not only assigning a name to the shoe, but also creating sort of a story and a theme behind it also. So, like with the Bloodline, that's really the story. That's the start of Brandon's path. We started calling it the path. And, so from details on the shoe where you start to incorporate, Raleigh Park and Gardenia, where he grew up, is a big part of who he is. I mean, you can see it just in the tattoos he has. Probably the top 6 tattoos that he has on his body all relate back to where he grew up. And so, we started playing around with this idea of, well, why don't we just take the whole street map from Gardenia and drop that into the graphic on the strap. And then the one thing that we did is Raleigh Park, which is where he grew up playing, is actually the only element on the strap that's called out.
Okay.
And so you see that, in the details, like that's the actual street map from Gardenia and the Raleigh Park area. As you move into the different graphics on the strap, I mean, every single one has a theme that's tied in not only to his life, but it's also specific to a colorway. From the Bloodline to Compton, the 50-50 shoe. There's a Raleigh Park version, the Roma. We pulled graphics and themes from all these different parts of his life and incorporated into the strap, which I think it just gives the shoe a little bit of
integrated
personality. Yeah, it just feels like it's something that's connected to the player. I just don't think you see that in a lot of in player shoes anymore. Like they're doing these things as one-offs or as LEs or as PEs, but nobody's selling that at retail anymore. And I think when you get into like what kids really care about with these players is they want to know about their lives. Like, everybody knows that a guy can shoot a jumper. Everybody knows that he can handle with both hands and he's lightning quick up the court. But I think, that's why guys will get online and watch a 6-minute segment every 2 weeks about what a guy does in his life, is because they want to know what's going on. And if you can incorporate that into the product, where then a player can talk to it,
Yeah.
You know, that to me is like Brandon can tell you every single detail in every story on these shoes. He's not as eloquent as John, but
But he does a pretty good job.
but
of
he
it, really.
but he knows it. You
knows
know,
it.
like it's something that he feels because he basically repeated all that stuff to us. I don't know that there's a lot of guys that even have signature shoes where they work with a designer that can do that. So
Yeah.
that was always something that was important to us. It was like this idea that if Brandon gets stopped on a street corner and somebody asks him, "Hey man, what's up with the red Compton shoe?" Like he can go into the whole story and
That's
he can
cool.
basically he can break it down for somebody, and they can say, "Well, wow, he really was involved. It's not just a BS statement about we involve our athletes. You know, these guys really are involved."